Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
We see the syphilitic shrinking obelisk, the white man's wilting dick. We see through dangling jowls of seedy game show trolls the smiling lie of the televised hive. The witches are watching with their thousand eyes. Witches are watching with their thousand eyes. We smell rotten teeth that speak beyond belief. A stick inside their skull would...
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 44. This episode is sponsored by the fine folks at Lee's Comics.
Hi, I'm George Takei. You know me as Helmsman Sulu on Star Trek. When I'm not busy going Warp Factor 8, I like to beam down to Lee's Comics in Mountain View and spend a lazy afternoon reading comics classics from Marvel to DC, from Dark Horse to Fantagraphics, and everything in between. So please, spend some time here at Lee's Comics and spend your hard-earned cash.
The Fun Ideas Podcast is made possible by listeners like you and from Lee's Comics of California, selling you what your mother threw out since 1982, online at leescomics.com. Just a reminder that Comic Fest is coming up this Saturday, October 26th, at your local comic book store. And as far as Fun Ideas Productions goes, I'm still waiting on proofs for my Warren Kremer book. I'm still getting material on my TTV Underdog book for my co-author Victoria Biggers. I am waiting for final cover image for my Monkees solo book by Scott Shaw. And I'm working on my Mad book. My girlfriend Abby and I have gone to business together with Light Up Your Life Travel Agency. So if you need to book a cruise, contact us. More details soon. Our guest today worked for Harvey Comics, Marvel Star Comics, Archie Comics, and many more. He has written his own children's books and created his own characters that are part of an educational series that's connected with schools. And here he is, Angelo DeCesare. Okay, on the phone I have Angelo DeCesare. So how are you today, sir?
I am very well, Mark. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And, we've spoken many times before, but I'm going to start with the inevitable question I always ask at the beginning is, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in drawing and how you ended up at Harvey Comics.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the way I got interested in comics is the way most comic book fans did. I just... growing up in the 60s, there wasn't a lot to do besides reading comics. Naturally, we had great comics, so just fell in love with them, and we had, something for every age. I think I went from, I had a sister who read, 3 years older than me, who read comics, and so I would read her comics as soon as I was old enough. And we went from Little Lulu and Harvey to Archie to Marvel and DC. That was the progression.
Right. And did you read other things like the humor magazines or the monster magazines or anything else, or just mainly
absolutely.
comics?
I was obsessed with monsters. Absolutely. I was obsessed with famous monsters of Filmland and Mad Magazine. Just couldn't believe that these publications were being put out by adults, for kids. I thought, what wonderful people these adults must be to spend their lives making these books for us. So it was great. Never thinking I'd one day be one of those adults, one of those Arrested Development. No, I didn't. Did I say that? One of those lucky adults gets to do the comics.
So how did this, natural progression, I guess, but how did this parlay into drawing your own comics or writing? Or you've done both, right? Is that correct?
Well, writer, but I did draw from a very early age. Apparently from the time I was 3, I was drawing maybe on the walls or something. But I always, tried to illustrate my writing. If I started off copying the stuff that I saw, if I saw something funny in Mad Magazine, I tried to do my own version of something, or in the comics. I really started at a very young age making my own comics and showing them to my friends and to my family. And I got a good reaction. So, they're to blame. They encouraged me. And that's how I ended up being a poor artist, because people kept telling me that I was doing, a good job. And so I said, well, I might as well keep going, because I wasn't good at anything else.
Right. But at least you're in New York. I mean, it's like me growing up in California. Now I'm in Oregon. It's like the whole industry was there. And it's like, at the time it intimidated me. I was like, I don't know if I want to move there. So you were right there. So, I mean, how did that make you feel? I mean, was it just an easy, just knocking on doors, or how did you get your start there?
Well, it was easy in the sense because when I started to when I decided to go into comics, I actually had been unemployed. I had dropped out of college, and I told you this. And I was sitting at home, and I picked up the New York Daily News, and I read an article that talked about a comic convention in New York. And there was an inker named Peter Cooper who said he worked for Harvey Comics. And I hadn't thought about Harvey Comics, in years. Once you stop reading, you move on.
Right.
And I said, well, they're still in business. I said, I can do that. I can write those comics. I can draw those. So I just, with the confidence and ignorance of youth, I just walked. I took the train down to Columbus Circle in New York, and I walked into the Harvey offices and said, I'm looking for work.
Yeah.
Can you use me? I met Leon Harvey, and he was there and came out to meet me, which I thought also was strange. He's the president of the company talking to this nobody, and he took me into his office and sat me down and said, draw. He took out a comic book. He said, here, draw this. And it was Hot Stuff. And so I drew Hot Stuff, and he said, wait a minute. And he went and he got Warren Kremer, and I had no idea who Warren was. Didn't know that he was the man who drew all those great comics for Harvey through the years, and someone I admired so much. No idea. And he said he liked my work also, and so they hired me to work in the art department. Right there. I was lucky.
And you were full time, or was that a freelance type gig? I forgot.
No, that was full time. Yeah, I made $165 a week.
Right.
1978, I should say that. And I was happy to get it.
Right,
right. It was great. Right.
And
I'm sorry. That's good.
And you mentioned Peter Cooper. He's the same guy who does Spy vs. Spy now, right? And Mad.
If it's spelled Kuper, then
yes, it is. Okay, yeah. He's done Spy vs. Spy and Mad for like the last decade. Of course, now Mad's kind of like on shaky ground, so he may not have a job anymore. But he did up until pretty recently. So, okay, because
he's responsible for my getting into comics, the way I did. So, I wish him luck.
Mm-hmm. And was he there at the time, or was he a freelancer?
He was a freelancer, yes. He came in a few times. I don't know if I even mentioned to him. I might have, that he was the one whose mention of Harvey got me off my ass and into working basically. So, which is great. So I owe him a lot. He may not know it.
And the basic new question I want to ask you is, it's like we had the recent passing of Ernie Colon, and I don't know if you've heard that. So I was just wondering if you had any good stories or memories or anything you'd like to say about Ernie.
Well, there was a memorial for Ernie this Saturday on Long Island, which I wasn't able to attend because I was up in Maine on vacation with my family. But I'm sorry I missed it because Ernie was a great artist. I was lucky to know him, and I met him when I started working at Harvey in '78, and I was there only 2 years. But I got to know him. He was really a good man, a great artist. He had terrific range. Not many people can do what he did, is to switch from funny cartoon style to illustrative superhero style, with the greatest of ease, and he was able to do that. One of those few persons. I didn't get to know him as well as some of the other ones, other friends at Harvey, the other people there, because he kind of kept his distance. He wasn't someone that you can get that close to. but I certainly admired him, and I liked him, as a person.
So he didn't mentor you like in the same way as like say Warren did or anything like that.
No. Warren was the man for me because Warren, his style was closest to the way I wanted to draw, and he had that more of a how can I put it? He had the more simple style of cartooning. Not that his drawings were simple, but Ernie was more, even then, more of an illustrator and leaned towards realism. And I shy away from realism. That's in my work,
right?
And in life too, apparently.
Right. And we'll talk about some of your other projects that you worked on over the years, but I just, of course, I always love the Harvey stuff, so I have to ask you about the Harvey stuff. But when you were there, was Ernie always, was he there the entire time you were there? Because I know he always kind of like a disgruntled person at times, and he wanted to branch off and do other things. But did he continue?
That's true.
Did he leave during your time there, or did he stay that whole time?
As far as I know, he always freelanced while I was there. He came in and out. His friends were Sid and Warren and Lenny Herman in the art department, so he'd come in and hang out with them. He had issues with Sid. They were best friends, but Ernie had to be pushed sometimes to get the pages done because he really didn't at that point. I don't think wanted to do the Harvey stuff as much as he had in the past. So he was trying to establish himself in the other world, in the world of superheroes and Marvel and DC and the other independent comics companies. And so he had to be pushed a little bit to get those. He did a lot of Jackie Jokers, character that I really didn't care for, but that was given to him, and he did a great job, of course. But that's what he did.
Yeah, that seems like his prime book once it was established. That he did. Richie Rich and Jackie Jokers, but then it seemed like he had a prime book everywhere. It's like he had John Carter, Warlord of Mars at Marvel, and Amethyst was for a time at DC, and then Creepy and Eerie over at Warren. So he did keep busy. It seemed like.
Oh, for sure. And then he had those series of graphic novels he did with Sid.
Oh yeah,
which were very well done. So he was always in demand, I think.
Yeah. I mean, now I'll miss him, too, because it's like he was always there if I had a question or something, which now I can't go to him to ask anymore. It's like, it's like everybody has to go. But I always thought, he was one of the younger guys over at Harvey, and then now he's gone,
No. He was, he wasn't actually younger. I mean, he was compared to maybe Sid a little bit younger, but, I was surprised to find out how old he actually was. Yeah,
but I mean, in comparison to, say, Warren or Howard Post or any of those guys that passed away years ago, that's what I meant, It's like, so he always seemed like the younger guy, even though he was still older, it's like, and Sid Couchy and stuff like that. It's like, now they're all gone.
I hope you got to ask him all the questions you wanted to. Because,
well, I tried. It's like the question I always was asking him, seemingly in later years, was everybody's saying this is Warren Kremer. Is this Warren or you? And it's like, and he would confirm whether it was him or not. And 9 times out of 10, he'd say, "No, this is Warren. It wasn't me." So he was very, very gracious that way. He never took credit for something he didn't do, and. Over the years, I'm pretty good at identifying him now, but it used to be very difficult for me, like other people, because he could draw like Warren spot on if he wanted to. But then later on, he kind of got into his own style. And of course, you kind of knew which ones he did because they had kind of more mystery or intrigue or something like that. And and that's why I was asking you about that the other day if you were there, but you were there after that, kind of mid-70s time where they seemed to put that vaults of mystery element on everything, that Harvey put out for a time. I guess that was the in thing to do in the 70s, is have everything have that kind of mystery horror element. But
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah. But even the other publishers did that. Archie did that for a time, and then Marvel was publishing a whole bunch of monster magazines and stuff like that. So it was just like something to do in the mid-70s.
Right. They were following the trend, trying to appeal to what they thought the readers wanted to see at that time. Sure. Mm-hmm. So that explains some of the bad decisions they made also, like Harvey superheroes and things like that.
Right. Was there anything that happened during the couple of years you were there that they were talking about but never really got off the ground, to your memory?
You mean projects projects and things?
Yeah, for Harvey, for for the existing characters, or just brand new projects or anything, or was it just pretty much status quo?
For the most part, yeah, it pretty much was status quo. I think they had already tried, like you said, some of the things that they thought would maybe increase readership and things, and they hadn't worked out for the most part. I think they realized that the tried and true formula was the best way to go, because when I was there, they pretty much did. They had the only book that was kind of a little different was they would team up two characters, like they had Casper with Richie. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was an odd teaming, and those were written by Stan Kay exclusively.
Right. And
they were full-length book stories, as you know. So but there was nothing really that radical that they were doing. No. Yeah. Not really.
And I guess you were there when it was the Richie Rich explosion. I mean, what was that like? I mean, a lot of people ask about that. It's kind of the butt of jokes. But then, since that time, other publishers have done that. There's been a zillion Superman publications, a zillion Batman publications. But at that time, to have 30 titles, with all Richie Rich on it, seemed very strange. I mean, was that strange to you, or is it just a job?
Well, I understood why they were doing it, because once Richie got popular, they tried doing more Richie books, and kids were buying them.
Yeah.
So I guess the logic for them was, let's see how many we can get kids to buy, and so they just would stick a word next, with Richie, like billions or zillions, or Richie Rich stock exchange, or Richie Rich, anything you could think of, and they were selling. So they kept doing it until the sales started to decline. Mm-hmm. I guess, and then they had to cut back.
Right, because I know a few they did cancel. Prematurely. Like the Super Richie didn't last very long. It was a couple years, but things like that.
Right.
But that was
kept us employed. Kept us working. Kept me working. Because there were so many books to work on. So many covers that needed to be colored and whatever else I had to do there. So it was worth it. It was very good.
So what did you typically do there? I mean, did you do more writing or more production work, or what was the main thing you did?
Well, as a member of the art department, while I was there, I only did art department jobs. I mean, in terms of doing paste-ups and making stats and coloring some of the pages, the covers and things, or deciding on not the whole cover, but the logos and things, and odd jobs here and there. My Harvey work was freelance. Sid. I went into Sid and said, I want to write some stories, and so he let me write a story. And then I said I wanted to draw my own stories now, and he let me do that. I mean, the pay wasn't great, of course. Harvey was kind of the lowest paying company then, but it was great experience and great opportunity, and the buzz of a lifetime to see my stories come out in a comic book, just like, and have to think about kids reading it the way I read comics as a kid. It was mind-blowing to me. So, that was great. That was worth any price. No matter how little low it was worth it, for sure.
Now, were you allowed to draw your own stories from the beginning, or were you only allowed to write them, or what did you do first, I guess?
It was kind of fast-tracked there, because I wrote a couple. And then with Warren helping me, I drew a couple of single pages. And then once they saw I could draw the characters, and once they saw that I could write for them, I was able to go to Sid and say, Sid, can I draw and write a complete story myself? And he said, okay. Which surprised me, but it was great. So I did a 10-page parody of the Maltese Falcon.
Actually, that was a question I was going to ask, but you said you answered it. It's like, how long of stories did you write? So you did a 10-pager. Was that like the average length you would do, or did you do like one-pagers or a combination? Or
No. I didn't do that much work for them overall, because I wasn't there, beyond 2 years. I did a 10-pager, two-part story, and then I did a 15-page, three-part story, The Merry Adventures of Richie Hood, and those are the two main stories that I ended up doing for them. I started a third, and then I ended up leaving, and I think I have completed. I think I might even have some of the pages here that I started working on. But I wanted the pay was so poor, and I had an opportunity, at King Features, so I had to leave.
Okay. Then what did you do at King Features? You said that, so.
Well, that was a job I got through Stan Kay, the artist, writer who did the Richie Casper books.
Right.
he recommended me for a job at King Features, which was better pay and a better job and everything. So yeah, when at King I worked in the art department, just like at Harvey. Only instead of working on comic books, I worked on comic strips, and I did whatever was required there. Putting on the Ben-Day, the gray tone, and making stats, and finishing art and correcting art, and then occasionally I would start to I'd get the writing and drawing work also from them. Freelance work.
Okay. And did you ever try to get your own comic strip at that time, or was it just too busy?
I had that's a good question. I did have a comic strip that I had written when I got to Harvey, which is about Catholic school.
Oh.
Unfortunately, not realizing that would be like the last kind of strip that a newspaper would publish. It was a funny strip called Philip. And but then while I was at King, of course, everyone was trying to get a strip done. So but I don't think I actually wanted to do a strip done. I was so into comic books. I was doing freelance for Harvey, and then of course for Star Comics, that was where most of my time was taken up. So I did give them a strip when I left King, which they rejected. But that was it, because I was also doing, as you know, the Katzenjammer Kids for King Features.
Right.
I was there.
And what did you do on that again? You were just writing, or did you do both? I forgot.
Oh, I did both. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
They needed someone right away to do the strip. They said, "Yeah, can you do this?" And so I said, "Yeah, sure." It was an extra $200 a week in addition to my salary. So that was an enormous amount of money back then in the '80s.
And how long did you do that one? I probably asked this before, but
Jammer Kids, I did from 1980, the end of 1981, like December of '81, till I think the beginning of '86. So I guess that's about 4 years plus, right? If my math is correct, probably not.
Right.
Yeah, so that's about 4 years plus, yeah.
And I've never really asked you much about that, but it's like, did you have any direction on it, or they just said, go for it, or did they give you any restrictions, you can't do this or that or the other?
Another good question, Mark. When I first started, they wanted me to imitate the style of my predecessor, Mike Senich, and I did not care for his style, because he really didn't have a style. He was tracing old Doc Winter strips. So I said, yes. So I said, that's why they let him go. And so I said, I'm going to revive this strip. I'm going to make it look like it did in its glory days, days of Dirks and H.H. and her. And as soon as I did a couple of those, the Bill Yates, the comic editor, said, "Nope, you can't do that. It's too radical a change." He said, "You have to draw like Mike Senich." So I started to do that. I got discouraged, and I kind of lost interest a bit. And I did one really bad strip, and he gave me hell for it. And I said, "You know what?" I said, if they're going to take this away from me, I'm going to go out doing it the way I want to. So very gradually, it reintroduced the style I wanted to do, the H.H. Nur style, and they didn't notice.
Wow!
In a couple of months, it looked as close to Nur and as I could do it, and that really was great, because I got to do it the way I wanted to, writing and drawing, and also I got to give the strip a little life back. It had once been the greatest strip in the world, and it really lost its luster. I got to revive that a bit. So that was good.
Right. And then when you left it, was it on good terms, or they just said time for you to go and we're getting another artist? Or
No. With King Feature, well, like I said, that was a freelance job. No, I wanted to stop doing it. It reached a dead end artistically. Yeah. I was tired of, and plus the captain was always spanking the kids, and that wasn't appropriate anymore.
Yeah.
Really. So I did it for that many years, and then I said, look, I can't do this. I have other things I want to say with my art, not Hans and Fritz. Although I loved the strip, and I loved doing it. It was a great learning experience for me.
Yeah, and I know they kept it on for a while longer after you left, but I think now they don't do it anymore at all, right? Is that correct?
Oh, no? I'm not sure. I know High Eisman took over, and he did it for many years. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's still done.
Yeah, I think High Eisman's on, what is he doing now? I think he does Gasoline Alley now, of all things, so but he's switched around, and he's done a billion different things over the years, so, yeah.
Oh, it's good to hear. I'm glad he's still working.
Yeah, I talked to him a couple of years ago. I should probably give him a call again, he's in his 90s, but he's still working as far as I can tell, so.
Oh, good, it gives hope.
Yes. And he was a joy to talk to. I talked to him about Bunny because that was his big Harvey connection, of course. But he's ghosted so many comic strips over the years. It's like, in fact, he revealed ones that I didn't even know he did. So I was like, wow.
Wow. Didn't know that myself. I'll have to read up about him.
Yeah.
A little wiki.
Mm-hmm. And any chance, probably not, because you probably don't have the rights, but any chance of getting your Cats and Jammer Kids into a compilation book or anything like that?
Well, it's funny because I recently connected with David Gerstein. I don't know if you know him. He's
Oh, yes.
a comic book historian.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he's big on the Cats and Jammer Kids, and he included my strips, and he put an article about me in a book that was published, I think, in Norway.
Mm.
And I told them I had my originals still. They gave me the originals, and I'm actually in the process now of trying to sell some of them to see if anyone has any interest in buying them to raise money for my TV thing that I'm working on, my Flip TV thing. So, but in terms of compilation, though, you're right. I don't have the rights to publish them because that belongs to King, I would imagine.
And, of course, since it's kind of obscure nowadays, I suppose there's no chance for it, even though I'd enjoy a compilation like that, even if it was just an overall Cats and Jammer Captain and the Kids history book type thing, or something like that,
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes, but he talked about doing a comic, though, with the Long John Silver character that appeared in the Cats and Jammer Kids, so he's trying to get the Norwegian company to sign off on that. If they do, then I'll be illustrating it. I think he'll be writing it.
All right, very good. Wow.
We're good.
But anyway, David Gerstein, I've known forever. We used to go to the San Diego Comic-Con way back when in the early 90s, before either of us were anybody. I don't know if I'm anybody now, but it's like he seems to get his hands on everything historical about, Felix the Cat or Oswald the Rabbit or something, anything that's kind of old-fashioned like that, and seems to revitalize it. So, but yeah. So my question was just totally non sequitur, going a totally different direction. I was just saying, let's talk about the Beatles. So,
okay, sure. I'm a fanatic.
We've talked before about the Beatles on various interviews and stuff like that, and I was just wanting you to recollect your experiences again, about where you were when you first heard of them and how you got interested in them, because I know you're a pretty huge Beatle fan, just like myself. So.
Well, I don't know how you would measure a huge Beatle fan, but I will say that I have Mark Lewison's book, Tune In, on Audible Books, and I've listened to it at least 10 times.
Oh, wow.
Including all 43 hours of it, including once in reverse from last chapter to first. So I guess that qualifies me as a Beatles fan.
Oh, wow.
or else it qualifies me for something else, which I don't want to talk about. Anyway, but yes, I was there in '64 when they first landed in America. I was 8 years old, living in the Bronx, and we were listening to the radio all the time, the transistor radios or whatever we had in the house, and we heard all of this, pop music coming on, and then suddenly there was I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was like nothing else we'd ever heard, and it just, totally blew our minds. It just, what is this sound? It was the girl group sound electrified, basically, but, on such a high level, and so all of us became very excited and wanted to know who these people were. I hadn't seen them, and as I was only 8. I picked up a copy of the Daily News, and they were on the cover, and I thought that they were airline hostesses because they had long hair and dark suits. And in my 8-year-old mind, that's what airline hostesses look like. And then I read the cat and said, "Oh, those are the Beatles." Okay, so that was, and then. We saw them in Ed Sullivan the next night, Sunday night, and our lives were transformed from that moment on. They were just, they had that magic, the charisma, and the great music, and it was a transfiguration. That's the only way I could describe it for most of us watching. We just totally fell for them.
Now, did you buy everything that came out from then on to the end of their career, or did you just kind of pick and choose?
No. I bought everything. My sister and I bought everything up till, I think, and through Help. I think we stopped with Rubber Soul because we thought that sound was getting a little weird. We were like, the early sound better. No, it's true.
Yeah.
And I also, I was like 10 or 11 then, and started to get more into baseball, and started to lose interest in music. So, combination of them getting their sound changing and their look changing, and getting older as a kid, and starting to get into sports, that I kind of dropped away from them for a while, and then came back to them, I guess, in high school. After when the White Album came out, I think. So.
That's interesting. Did you ever see the book? It came out in the 70s called Growing Up with the Beatles.
I heard of it. I don't think I own it, although I own a lot of books, including yours.
Yeah.
But, no, I don't.
Yeah, I think the author's name is Ron Schaumburg, but he writes from the perspective of being a fan in the United States. I don't think he was in New York. I think he was elsewhere. But being a fan in the United States, growing up with the Beatles, and he had the same experience you did. It's like around Rubber Soul, he thought they were looking and sounding kind of too weird, and so he got out of it for a while. And I think it might have been after Sgt. Pepper, but somewhere around the White Album or something. Yeah, he came back into it and became a big fan again. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, but it did turn some of their fans off when they started to change. Only because we weren't ready for that, I think, and also I think their music started to be for older, like for teenagers, and we weren't quite yet teenagers. I think the best author in terms of capturing that era is Nicholas Schaffner.
Oh yeah,
I think his books, The British Invasion, and his book about the Beatles, I think are the best. If you want to read about someone who lived it through that time and had the full fan experience, I think his books are great.
And that book, the one you're talking about, Beatles Forever, and then the other one that I mentioned, was some of the first ones. I became a fan in the 70s, of course, so they were all said and done. But, there was still the excitement that they might get back together again, which unfortunately never really happened. But, hey. It was...
You didn't have to be there, Mark. That's the great thing about the Beatles. You didn't have to be there. You can jump at any time, at any age, at any year, and still appreciate them.
Yeah. And I am fascinated when, young kids like them now. It's like, for myself, I would say, well, at least they were all still alive and they're young or whatever, youthful, I was going to say. And it's like, now it's like, can anybody get into it? I mean, Paul's like almost 80, Ringo's almost 80, it's like, and the other two are gone, it's like, but, I guess it's like appreciating classical music or anything else. You don't need Beethoven around to appreciate it, so I get it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the fact that dreadful movie yesterday is doing so well around the world simply because it has Beatles music. I mean, that's a sign of their power. No, really. I'm sorry to say that I thought it was an awful movie. I thought it was a disservice to them. I almost walked out of the theater, but I was sitting in the middle aisle.
I actually liked it, but I could see your point. Yeah, I could totally see your point. The one that I had trouble with, which actually I liked it better the more recent time I saw it, was Across the Universe. That came out about 10 years ago or so.
Oh yeah. I thought that was a better film. It didn't try to be anything more than a series of Beatles songs, presented in I guess a way to appeal to current generation. But, yesterday tried to be more, and I think it really did them a disservice because it made it seem as though their only contribution to the world was music. And
I see. Yeah,
it's much more than that.
Yeah,
much more than that.
I get it.
The Rolling Stones existing without the Beatles is ludicrous. Really.
Although I admit that was kind of funny, when he's doing the Google searches.
It was very funny, but John Lennon would be turning in his grave if he saw that. So he thought that the Stones copied everything the Beatles did.
Right.
So he would have really laughed at that.
So, I guess I enjoyed it more than you, only from the standpoint is I had a few laughs with it. But, it can be kind of cringeworthy material, I admit. If you're like...
it was very funny. It was a funny film.
Yeah.
No matter that. But the whole premise of the world being the same, except for not having the Beatles' music, practically, is just...
Right.
It's just it shows a lack of understanding of their impact on society.
Right.
Which was, immeasurable.
Mm-hmm. Quick question. So when you started it's not a quick question here. I'm asking a long time. When you started veering away from the Beatles and going into baseball, I mean, did you follow music at all? Like, did you ever think of the Monkees or any of the other groups, or you just were completely out of it and just solely into baseball at that point?
No, see, back then, it was considered like this was the hippie era, and if you were into sports, like I was hanging out with my friends, and they were all kind of jocks and into sports and things like that. It was considered another world, like be interested in the flower power music and hippie stuff and everything. So we tried to stay away from that. I did hear the music because I had an older sister and she did play the radio and we did watch TV and stuff. But I had very little interest, and I regret it because now it's some of my favorite music.
Oh, okay.
But unfortunately, I was influenced by my environment.
Yeah.
And they were kind of anti-Beatles, hippies, anti-stuff. We all grow up and we all live and learn. So.
Right. During those years, did you always have aspirations to be a writer or an artist, or did you want to be a professional ball player or a musician or anything else?
No. Never anything but an artist. No,
okay, I'm just kind of curious because if you get, some people get so obsessive. I want to be a musician this week, and then you find out how difficult it is or whatever. It's like, okay, I'll go back to being an artist or what, Which
no, for a couple of years I wanted to be a skydiver, but I have a fear of heights, so that. But it was all I could really do was to draw and write stories, and people liked what I did, so I thought somehow, some way, I'd be able to make a living at it. Or was I wrong?
No.
But yeah, that there was never anything else for me. Art saved my life pretty much. Mm-hmm. My art.
And after you were at King Features, where did you go? Was that back to Star, or were you working there concurrently when you were writing for Star?
No, I only worked for Star as a freelancer. So when the guys at Harvey left, which I think I was partly responsible for, because when I left Harvey, I went into Sid's office and said, I can't work for this kind of money anymore. It's ridiculous. And they kind of looked at me, and I think they kind of, and then I left, and I think that shocked them because I had been doing so well there in terms of the artwork and everything. Mm-hmm. The fact that I would just leave and say that to them got them thinking, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing working for the Harveys? That they're not, without getting credit. I said to them, you don't even give artists credit on the stories.
Yeah.
I said, that's crazy, and I may not be really responsible for it, but I think I might be. So because not long afterwards, I heard that they were thinking of leaving Harvey and going over to Marvel. So I might have been the catalyst for that. I hope I was anyway, because it was a good thing. They needed to get away from that place.
Right. It is kind of an interesting theory. It probably is true, because, I obviously wasn't there, but, when I've done my histories and everything, of going through and interviewing everyone, it seems like, at that time in the late 70s, early 80s, there was just litigation lawsuits with everyone, like Fred Rhodes didn't like it that he was not getting paid for Sad Sack reprints, and the family was fighting with each other, and, I disclose it all in the book and everything like that, and it's like, if it wasn't a catalyst, it certainly was part of the whole thing going wrong at the same time.
Yeah, at the least I gave them a push in that direction.
Yeah.
I showed them how a younger person, a younger artist in the business, felt about the company. And certainly at Marvel at that time, they were giving credit to artists.
Right.
So I could see that, and I didn't understand why Warren Kremer was not getting credit for his magnificent work on these books. It just made no sense.
Right. So how did you get it back in with Sid and everybody else first started? Did he call you up, or did you find out about it? How did that work?
Oh yeah, he called me. He said, we're forming a new company, and we want you to do some work for us. And so I walked over, and there I was at Marvel. It was so strange to be in a more kind of a corporate kind of comic book place, and that had so many people there. But Sid had his own office, and they were considered really not truly part of Marvel, because of Marvel, they had the fanboys kind of with all the superhero books and everything, and they had to look their noses down on the Harvey Star Comics line. But yeah. So that's I just went, and then we started working. I started working as if without missing a beat. I started working with Warren and with Howie Post, writing stories, and they would draw them.
Mm-hmm.
I did some drawing. Drawing myself.
And we've discussed it before, but can you mention some of the books you worked on back then?
For Star, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, most of my work was with Heathcliff, which I loved doing. Heathcliff, the George Gately strip. That was actually done by John Gallagher, the great John Gallagher, great gag cartoonist ever. And then I also worked on Royal Roy and Top Dog, and I did Flintstone Kids. I did Care Bears. I think I did maybe one issue of Ewoks or Mad Bulls. I'm not really sure. I also worked on Camp Candy. Was that Star Comics also?
Yeah, I was at the tail end of it, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, so
because eventually Star Comics just kind of morphed back into Marvel, and they continued on, but they just had the Marvel tag on the top. I think Alf did that. It was Star at the beginning, and it was Marvel by the end. So.
Well, that's because Sid left. Yeah, Sid went to go back to Harvey. Jeff Montgomery bought the rights to the Harvey characters, and Sid went back to doing Harvey stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to working with him.
Okay.
So we're at Harvey, and I stopped working for Star.
Mm-hmm.
They did offer Tom DeFalco, who was running the comics, and he did say, "Do you want to take over for Sid at Star Comics?" And I couldn't at the time because my daughter had just been born, and I was home with her, and I didn't want to work full time and then give it over to a sitter. So that went that opportunity.
That's too bad. But it sounded like it may not have lasted anyway, so you probably did the correct choice. So
I was. I'm glad you said that, because I do feel much better.
Yeah.
No, the truth is, yes, it probably wouldn't have lasted. I would have probably run it into the ground anyway.
Well, I'm not saying that, but it just seemed like Marvel was headed. It was kind of folding it closed anyway. It's like a lot of titles started off in the beginning, and then over time, it was probably difficult for Sid even because they cancel so many titles. It's like, hey, we're just getting this going. Nope, because
kids weren't buying comics anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
That was the reality. They weren't buying those comics anyway. The computers had taken over, the video games had taken over, and so comics had become kind of passé.
Mm-hmm. So when you got over to Harvey the second time, were you writing more stories, or is it artwork, or both, or what?
This time it was just writing.
Oh, okay.
He had some artists lined up, and I think I did Police Academy. Was that Star?
No, that was a Harvey one. Yeah, that was a Harvey one. Yeah.
That was okay, and I did New Kids on the Block.
Yeah. Seems like everybody did New Kids on the Block at some point. So.
And I did my best work ever. Yeah, it's true. What do you mean by that? No. Anyway.
Well, I know a lot of people that did. Frank Hill, Greg Bita, I knew Ernie, and I think about the only one who didn't was probably because his post his stroke was Warren. He didn't work on New Kids, but
right.
Everyone else it seemed to. I think even Howie posted a New Kids story. So.
Right. Yeah. No, I was making a bad joke there, but I'm glad you missed it.
Okay. Whoops.
But I actually worked on Casper again for him because he did a Casper comic for England, which was a magazine.
Yeah.
And that was tremendous fun. But my best work was for Beetlejuice that I did. I wrote it and Dave Manick drew it, and I think that was my best work that I did for them.
Okay.
It was really, a great property. I thought, and Dave's drawing was really wonderful.
Did you do the entire series on that? Because I know there was like a mini series, and then they did a proper series after that.
You mean Beetlejuice?
Yeah.
No, Michael Gallagher also wrote for them, and
okay.
maybe one or two others. I'm not really sure, but most of the writing for Beetlejuice was myself and Michael Gallagher.
Got it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Harvey went away again. So where did you go after that?
Well, what happened was that Sid just called me up one day and said, "There's no more work." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I was home with my daughter, and there was really I didn't have any work. It kept me going for a while. But so I gradually found out that I could work for Archie. I had a friend, Darrell Edelman. Someone gave me his name, and he got me my first Archie assignment. And not that I was a big Archie fan, but I had been growing up. And then, of course, once you start getting into those characters, they're such classic characters. So I got to love doing those books. So Victor Gorelli apparently liked my work very much after I did my first story, and he started giving me more work. But that was all before I started my second career.
Right.
As a children's book.
Right. So. And we'll get to that. But at Archie, did you write on any particular title or any character, or just anything?
I started with Little Archie.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just did all the characters, whoever they gave me. Archie, Jughead, Betty and Veronica. I have tons of storyboards that I did through the years. I can't believe how many I have. So I must have done a lot of work for them. And I was fortunate that most of my stories were drawn by Stan Goldberg.
Oh, okay.
It was, because Harlow, I think, by that time I think I was on the outs with them over the Josie and the Pussycats.
Well, see, I must have read everything that you ever did, because, except maybe Cats and Jammer Kids. But no, as far as comic books go, since I was not reading superhero stuff, and I read stuff all throughout the 80s and 90s, and it's like...
you're the one.
Yeah, I always seem to see your name popping up everywhere. I go, man, this guy's prolific. So it's like...
Yeah, well, I have good range. I mean, I'm able to switch from one, character to another and pretty much capture it by just, reading a few issues. I've always been able to do that. That's why I loved, when I was a kid, loved Mad Magazine, because I was able to copy the styles, of some of the artists and everything, and, it was painstaking, but I could do it, and that kept me going. So, yeah, that's it. Until I gradually, in my 40s, found my own style. It took me a while.
Right. Now, did you ever work for Mad or even try out, or DC or any of the other publishers or anything?
With Mad, no. I think because the Mad that I loved the most was the early EC Mad with my hero Bill Elder, and also with the great Jack Davis and Martin Wood. Those are my favorites. And of course, the greatest comic writer of all is Harvey Kurtzman. So that was the Mad. So I really let me try to think. I'm sorry. Can you, Mark, repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Well, basically. Yeah, I was saying, did you ever try out for Mad or for DC or any of the other publishers?
No. That was all because they didn't do kid stuff. They did, and if it's not funny, I'm not interested.
Oh, okay.
The work, right? I'll read it, but I won't write it or draw it. I did do something for the comic line Valiant, I think it was. I did Archer and Armstrong. I did a full-length book for them, and which was never published because they went out of business. So that was one, and I also did something for the final issue of National Lampoon, which should have been the final issue of Lampoon, like I've told you about, which was a parody of Richie Rich called Richie Riche, R-I-C-H-E. Yeah. It's filled with all kinds of inappropriate stuff, but it paid well, and I needed the money, so I did this thing. And Warren found out about it, and he said, "Ange, did you draw this thing?" And I said, "Yeah, Warren." He said, "Well, did you need the money?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, it's okay then." So that was nice. He forgave me because I copied his style to a T, and it was really, really bad. I mean, violent and everything.
Yes. So, I do remember seeing that one. Yes, and although I found it, in poor taste, I thought it was very funny. So it's like, but it's just like
I didn't write it.
You didn't write it. Oh, okay. I thought you did.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I would have done a better job. I would have made it really like Richie, and I would have made the violence a little more acceptable and the other stuff. But I was happy to even get the job, so I never just drew it. And yeah. That was it. Yeah, no connection otherwise to Marvel or DC. No.
Okay.
Except loving the characters.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too. It was like because you were already at Marvel, if there was ever an inclination to write for the superheroes or anything else, but you answered that. So.
No. If I thought I could do a good job, equal to what they were doing, I might have tried, but it really wasn't my thing. So I didn't even think about it. I was always looking for the next way to use my talent, doing the thing that I wanted to do, which is write for kids.
Right. And then, of course, that leads to, which you've talked with me before, but we'll discuss it again, your own projects, which seem to be highly successful. So talk about that.
Well, that was, when I was out of work, as I mentioned, when the comic book work stopped. My wife suggested that I write a children's book because we read so many to my daughters, and some of them were just not good. And I thought, well, you could do better than this. So, and some were great, of course, Dr. Seuss and some of the other ones. But so I tried drawing and writing a comic, a children's book, and I put it aside for a while because there was just too many pages. It was going on and on. And then a friend of mine, Rick Parker, some of you know, right, came over, and his wife, Lisa Truciani, who worked for Marvel, and they told me about a Dr. Seuss contest that Random House was looking for a writer and artist, someone who could do both, to write the next great children's book. So I entered with that book I had been working on. I finished it off. It was called Anthony the Perfect Monster, and it was based on my childhood experiences, having a lot of anger as a boy and pretending to be a werewolf and the monster connection. And, they announced the winner, and it wasn't me, some woman in Tennessee. And so then I thought, well, okay, so I'll get my work back from them. And I called them up, and they said, well, we can't find it. I said, oh, my God. That was like low the point of my life. Not only had I not won, but they lost all my work. And then they called back and said, we found it, and one of the editors has it, and we want to publish it. So I went from bottom to the top in a few hours and survived. So that's what happened. So they said, we're going to publish it. If you can wait another year, we'll publish it as part of the Beginner Book series.
Yep.
I said, sure, fine with me. I'll wait a year. So it took a while, but I redid it, with the help of an editor, Mallory Lohr, and it came out as a part of Dr. Seuss Beginner Book series. And the best compliment I got was from Kathy Goldsmith, who was Dr. Seuss's art director. She said Ted would have liked this book. That was nice.
Wow, that's cool. Any chance of that one? I don't think it's in print anymore. I did find a copy. I think the last time I talked to you, I said I didn't have one or something, but I did find a copy used. But
I can send you one. Whenever you don't have anything that I did, Mark, let me know. And
I'll take one if you sign it.
Of Anthony the Perfect Monster?
Sure.
Of course, no.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. We'll talk offline. But then you got into that other long-running series where you're like, you told me about this before, but I wanted to refresh my memory. It's like where you're touring around the schools, and what was that one?
Well, that was from Anthony, a friend of ours. My wife had a friend named Vicky Ergang who was working at Brooklyn College, and she said, you have this book that's out, and you're good with kids, because I used to play with her sons and stuff and entertain them, and she said, you should be in the classroom. If you do a program, if you come up with a program, I'll put you in some schools. So I made up this program with my book and showing the kids the drawings and teaching them to draw some pictures. And I started working in schools, and it was another, like one of those moments, like the Beatles, only more personal. Everything just clicked. Everything fell into place. This is where I belong, in the classroom with kids, teaching them, showing them how to draw, how to write, making them laugh, making them feel good about themselves. So from that, I started doing more schools. Every year I did a few more, and then Vicky connected me with her friend named Tova Ackerman, and Tova said, I can put you in even more schools, so if you work for me at Puppetry and Practice. I said, fine. And she said, have you got any books that are unpublished? And I had written something called Flip's Fantastic Journal. And she looked at it, she said, oh, this is great. She said, I'll publish this. So she printed up the first copies of that book, privately printed. And then I took one of those and brought it to Dutton Books. And they loved it, so they did the published version of that. So that's how I got that book going. And that really has been my life for the last 20 years, is working with the flip journal books, and working in classrooms as a teaching author. I think that's what you call it. So.
Yeah. And do you still do new editions of those books, new volumes and things?
Well, I did about 10, Mark, and including a comic book where Flip and his friends are superheroes, saving the world from the polluter. Crunch the dinosaur was polluting the earth, the Crunchinator. And, and I did. Each book has a program that goes with it in the classroom. So, and Tova helped me develop these, and that's been keeping me going all these years. So, since then I've kind of stopped. I did one about manners a couple of years ago, and that was the last one.
Oh, okay.
That I did because we're running out of curriculum. So
Right. Well, I know the last time I talked to you about this is like you were still in the midst of doing them, so I was just curious if you kept going.
Right. Yes.
No,
it's time to get Flip on TV, and that's what I've been working on.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're still working with the characters, just a new avenue. So tell us about this new project that you're trying to do then.
Well, I was working with a musician with one of my Flip programs named Jody Gray, and he saw the reaction that the kids had to Flip, and he composes for TV shows, for kids shows and stuff, and he's a great musician, a remarkable musician, could play many instruments, can write music in any genre, and he said, this has to be on TV. So he encouraged me to put together some kind of package, and I have a friend named Alan Newirth, who's like my best friend, and he does work for TV. He does a lot of writing, and he's head writing and show running, and he said he would help me, so I started pitching this property. I came up with an idea for a TV show. It wasn't my best idea, Mark, because I really wasn't sure what a Flip show should be, and so I kind of sent PBS a lesser version of what the show's potential was, and then but I learned from my mistakes, and they critiqued it, and they sent their ideas back to me, and so from over the last couple of years, it's evolved, and I really got it this time. I turned it into a drawing show, and I made this thing called a deck, which is kind of like a PowerPoint thing that networks insist on having, and I did something like that, and I found a partner to help me raise money, and the partner's name is Seth Jacobson, son of Sid. Yes. Yeah. Seth and I got together, and he became my business partner.
Wow.
We formed an LLC called Gaga Waga Enterprises, based on what one of my characters, Baby Diggy, what he says, Gaga Waga. And, one name that no one else had, believe it or not. And so just actually yesterday, Mark, to keep you current, we got a lawyer, which we were having a very hard time doing, an entertainment lawyer that we could afford, who's working with us on an agreement, which we're going to sign this week. And on Friday, we're going to give our funds. Seth raised a lot of money for this project through his connections, and we're going to have a 1-minute sample produced, a teaser of the Flip show. It's a drawing show, getting kids to draw with shapes. And the company that's doing it is called Studio Pigeon in Poland. Studio Pigeon in Poland is going to pitch it for us at animation festivals, hopefully in the fall and in the spring. So that's what that's about. And that's what I've been working on the last couple of years.
So the goal is to get it on PBS, or how?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The goal is to get a network interested by looking at the teaser and something called the Bible that they're going to produce for us, which tells about the characters, what they do, what they look like. And what you do is you take it to these festivals, and there's representatives there from Nickelodeon, from Netflix, from Cartoon Network, from all these. There's tons of networks now, Disney, whatever. And hopefully you'll get someone interested in it, and then then we'll see what happens.
Wow.
Make a deal. But I'm 64, so I mean, it's about time I started doing something, that's going to earn me some money in my life, besides comic books and children's books, which really haven't, working in schools. Right. So, see what happens.
Well, I mean, Dr. Seuss went into his 90s also, so hey, you got some time.
Yeah, it's true. And the guy who did Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Oh, yeah. What's his name again? Norman Bridwell.
Yeah. Yes, he didn't make it until it was in the 70s or 80s or something when they finally bought his property for TV. So,
right.
So that would be nice if that happens. It may not, but I'm going to give it my best shot, Mark. I'm as they say in Hamilton, I'm not throwing away my shot. I don't know if you're familiar with that wonderful play, Hamilton.
I'll have to see that. Of course, you're in New York, so you can see almost anything if you want to. I suppose it doesn't always get out to Oregon here.
Well, maybe they'll do like a high school version or something.
Yeah, that's true. Well, they do. Here's what we get out here. We have this Best of Broadway, and that makes the tour that comes out here. So, but they haven't done Hamilton yet, probably because Hamilton still makes money right now in New York. So it's like they don't travel it around until it starts dying. So I'll get in a couple years.
It's been in the big cities. It's been in London. It's been in Chicago. So it'll get there. But I've seen some great theater in small towns. We go up to Maine every year, and they have a wonderful theater in Brunswick where they do Broadway type plays and stuff. So you can see good theater anywhere.
Right.
So, but hopefully that's what. But I do recommend it if you get a chance. It's a masterpiece.
All right. Very good.
It's a masterpiece which encourages dissent, which is a rare thing nowadays.
Yeah.
Okay.
And apart from the TV show, any other projects in the works or anything else you want to discuss?
Well, just, I'm still working in the schools. We applied for about 14 grants to try and get schoolwork. Last year I had a very slow year, and this year it's going to be a very good year because we got every grant that we applied for, so that's going to be good. I'll be doing a lot of schoolwork. Like I said, Mark, if I do sell my show, I will try and find a place for you somehow because I think you're very talented.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
I love your knowledge of comics, and I think I don't know if you would like to write or something, or what we would like to do, so something. But somehow, I'd like to bring all my friends in, my talented artistic friends.
I can write, I can draw. Probably not as good as you, but hey.
No, don't say that. I draw the way I draw that suits my writing. That's all I try to do. To complement my writing.
Right.
And any way you draw.
And I like the Beatles, so hey, we're pals.
Yes, that's true. That's true. We are Beatle brothers.
Yeah. And I don't know if you are, one last Beatle thing. I assume you're looking forward to the Abbey Road Extended Deluxo Super Special Edition.
Anything. Yes. Sure.
So,
what about you?
That's coming out at the end of the month.
I keep getting a lot of bulletins from Beatle Fest, from Mark Lapito, the guy who puts on the Festival Beatle Fest. So he sends me endless emails about what product that they're going to have available at much higher price than I want to pay.
Of course. Always. Yeah. I'm actually kind of happy Abbey Road, the special one, is a little bit less than the White Album, so I'm like, I don't have to go broke on this one.
Yeah.
But I had to get the Deluxo White Album, so it's like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, and these things have been buried for so long. We're still waiting for Let It Be. When is Let It Be coming out? They said it'll be soon. I mean, I can't believe it.
Well, at least Peter Jackson's working on it. He's working on a different cut, so, hopefully they'll put his version and then the original version. That's what I've heard. So it'll probably come out in 2020 because they have to do the 50th anniversary of the release, not not when it was filmed, so I get it.
Right. But Mark Lewison had said that that it shows, they were afraid that it showed the Beatles breaking up and being mean to each other. He said it's not that way at all. He said if you see it, it's mostly them working harmoniously together. Yeah. He said he was so surprised.
Well, even Peter Jackson has said in interviews, it's like the footage they didn't use even shows them even more harmonious. And, it's almost like they put that one argument with George and Paul just to kind of break it up a little bit. It's like, how are these guys so chummy? It's like they certainly got to fight at some point.
Of course, yes. They did very well together, considering they were up each other's noses for 10 years or more. Yeah. So considering, but they're the Beatles. There's nothing like them.
I'm hoping for great things in the next year. So,
Yeah. Let's hope.
Yeah.
For you personally and for everything else too. Sure.
Yes. All right. Well, if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, do you have a website or a Facebook page or something that we can contact you?
Well, I have a website, but it's very poor, and it's only for my flip characters. And if you want to purchase flip books and take a look at what the characters do, so I would say no to that. You could always call me or email me if you have any artistic questions. But I guess it would be through my website, which is www.flipandmuzz.com. And it's my email and my phone number and everything. I'm happy to talk to anyone.
And Flip and Muzz is FLIPANDMUZZ, right?
MUZZ,
okay.
Right, yes. Based on the two characters in the books, based on me and my friend, Andrew Mussolini. My childhood buddy.
Wow.
Okay,
All right.
I'm with the
Well, I am looking forward to more good projects coming from you, and more Beatle projects, and anything else. And I will have to, you mentioned it earlier. I'm going to have to get that audiobook because I started reading Turn On, or what's it called, Turn On or Tune In or whatever.
Tune In.
Yeah,
Tune In.
I started reading it, and I got about a fourth of a way through it, but I've never finished it because it's such a big book. And it's like, wow, if I could listen to it.
The Audible is good. It's like having someone read to you.
Yeah.
My mom's reading me a story. That's how I think while I'm driving. So, and then, like I said, I've listened to it 10 times. You got to get it.
Okay.
It comes to life. The narrator is a guy named Clive Mantle.
Oh.
And he does a great job. And he also imitates the voices of the Beatles and of Brian Epstein and George Martin, and he does an amazing job.
Wow.
The only one he doesn't do very well is Little Richard. That's kind of a failure. But the other voices are uncanny. So
all right.
I highly recommend it.
All right, very good. Okay, I want to thank you, Angelo, for being my guest today and being on the podcast. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you again for listening, and thank you again, Angelo DeCesare, for being my special guest. Episode number 45 will be coming soon. If you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a Patreon of Mark Arnold and Fun Ideas Productions. If everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help in continuing the production of my books and this podcast. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. The opening and closing music for the Fun Ideas podcast is provided courtesy of Andrew the Slow Poisoner Goldfarb and is used with permission. This has been the Fun Ideas podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2019 Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Place two rhinestone kisses on those blind eyelids and drive with your velour chauffeur across the river Styx. Popping creation pills in the pink electric church. The final flicker of your lewd jeweled boob to